Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Dellera, and this episode is brought to you by our good friends at Rhythm. Rhythm is on the cutting edge of betting technology by harnessing AI. It's the newest thing, it's the thing that you're hearing about all about in the news, and we're able to use it to make a couple bucks. The biggest thing here is that it provides some modeling for you that gives you a baseline, and you can even tweak it and create your own model. You think something's important, you think threes are important, you think pace is important, you think rebounds important, you can put those into the blender, and Rhythm takes care of it on the back end and spits you out a model while back testing it for you to let you know if the things that you thought were important not only are, but is it actually profitable? And it's a system that then you can follow for the rest of the season. You've got basketball, whether it's the NBA, college basketball, and so many of the intertwining player props as well. So between that, a little bit of the NFL, a little bit of college football, there's always something to help you be a better, and you can get a week for free on me. And we have a 25% off coupon code if you decide that that's something that you want to do. And the link is in the bio right here as well. So if you've tried it before and you're like, I don't know, maybe it's a little expensive for me, I'm giving you 25% off your first month. So you can test the results over a little bit of even a longer period of time. Now, for this episode, we have a very short Wednesday slate. Normally, we have these big Wednesday slates, right? But because of the NBA Cup, it's a bit shorter. It's a 2-game slate, so we're going to talk about those games in a little bit of detail. We'll talk a little bit about the games that we just saw on Tuesday night, and I'll talk a little bit about the Thursday slate, and I'll take a peek at the Friday slate and see if there's anything that I think is like super interesting, right? So it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a pretty solid episode, and we'll just dive right into it. So I want to start off with best bets for these games first, because I know that's what people really are coming for. So I'm going to start with the Knicks versus the Atlanta Hawks. And like for the people watching on YouTube, like, I mean, everybody knows pretty much that I'm a big Knicks fan, but like we're trying not to be biased too much here, but I do really think this is a good Knicks spot. The biggest thing for me is that look, the Knicks are 7-point favorites, 6.5 in some places, and they opened as 8-point favorites. There was a little bit of buyback against them with the Atlanta Hawks, but now we're seeing a little bit more action on the Knicks at the 6.5. So we'll have to kind of see how the line shakes out overnight. But I do think this is a good spot for the Knicks. The Knicks are a fundamentally better basketball team than the Atlanta Hawks in pretty much every single advanced metric. This is a spot to back the Knicks. When we look at their adjusted net ratings and some of the information, like some of the stuff that we have on dunks and threes, right? When we look at what the Knicks are able to do, the Knicks are a top 10 team. The Knicks are number 6 in adjusted net rating. They're plus 4.6. They're second in offense, 118.1. Depending on actually the resource that you use, the Knicks are a lot of them, they're number 1. Like Cleaning the Glass, they're number 1. NBA.com, they're number 1. But Dunks and Threes does some stuff where it adjusts for schedule and a little bit of some of the difficulty there. So that's why they're second here. But either way, tremendous level offense. And they're 15th in defense. Atlanta, 13 and 12, first in adjusted net rating, minus 3.1, first in adjusted offense, and 20th in adjusted defense. So there's literally just nothing that they're better than the Knicks at except for playing fast. They play fast. So they play at the third fastest pace in the league compared to New York, who is at 27. So they're the fourth slowest team in the league. The reason I think that that's important is a lot of times when we see these bigger spreads, it's always a little bit harder to cover a big spread if the pace is slow. If there's fewer possessions, when we see that game total creeping closer to 200, as opposed to this one for the Knicks and the Hawks, it's 237.5 at the time of this recording. It's a little bit easier to cover those big numbers when we're expecting a lot of points. And just looking at this matchup stylistically, it's fascinating for a couple different reasons. Number one, the Hawks have been bizarre this season. We've known like the Knicks are going through some growing pains. They're trying to incorporate Karl-Anthony Towns. You're trying to get everybody kind of on the same page offensively. You're trying to make sure that this team is cohesive for the playoffs. The Hawks have been insane because we know that Trae Young is just diming like crazy. He's averaging over 12 assists a game without DeJounte Murray, but they've beaten the Knicks, the Cavs, and the Bucks. They've lost twice to the Wizards and they lost to the Blazers. So they're just extremely unpredictable. And the reason that I think I'm even more comfortable laying the points with the Knicks here with the 6.5 is when Atlanta doesn't show up, they just don't show up. Like they're just getting their doors blown off. So for me, I think that this is a clear Knicks spot, despite the fact that the Knicks have been, so or so like against the spread over the course of the entire season. And they've had some moments of like struggle where you'd say they should handily win this game, and then they don't. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the team isn't 100% gelled together yet. The key in this particular spot, though, is that Atlanta is horrific at defending the 3-point line, are allowing threes at the second highest frequency in the NBA, and their opponents shoot the best percentage in the NBA, 39.1% per cleaning the glass. And the Knicks, they don't take like an overwhelming amount of threes, but they shoot 40.8% from beyond the arc, the second best number in the NBA. So I think that's a pretty significant advantage, and that's something that I think we're going to be able to exploit. For me, I like taking a bunch of Knicks. I think you could get a little fun with this. If you throw like the Knicks money line with every Knick to make 2 threes, like all the starters, and probably McBride too, right? So if you throw all the starters and McBride to make a 3, along with the Knicks on the money line, you're going to probably be looking at like 15, 16 to 1 or so. It's kind of a juicy number, kind of fun to play too. And you're not really asking for a lot because that's something that Atlanta gives up. It also leads me to part of why I like Karl-Anthony Towns here. So Towns, I like for over 37.5 points plus rebounds. And when these two teams played earlier in the year, Towns had 36 and 16. So he almost went over this number in just points alone, right? He's gone over this in 55% of games this season. And with Atlanta's defensive issues, the pace, and he presents a really tough matchup, I think, for Atlanta from a defensive perspective, because Clint Capella is going to have trouble defending him because he can't really stretch the floor that way. Okongwu isn't really tall enough, I feel like, to defend him properly. And Cat is like surprisingly strong. He's got a pretty decent bag too. So it's still a little bit tougher for him. And there's enough speed there. There's enough ability to create for himself off the bounce, along with setting some other players up that you can't just put like anybody on him. The other key for New York has been Josh Hart's 3-point shooting has actually been acceptable this year. And normally, what you would see maybe an instance like this is you would see Capella on Hart, because you would say, well, Hart can't really make the 3, and we're just going to let him, we're just going to leave him open. Like, we're just not going to really cover him. The problem is that he's shooting it consistently enough now that you just can't leave him open. So although you would rather have Josh Hart taking the threes than Karl-Anthony Towns, for example, it does create like a pressure point though, because Hart is a bad matchup in more ways than one for Capella because of the speed, the dexterity, etc. So it does create an issue in that regard. So I think that this is really an excellent opportunity for this Knicks offense, and I'm very comfortable laying the points with the Knicks at -6.5. I like getting it under 7. I feel like you're getting it where it's still not a 2-possession game, but you're kind of in that range where teams probably are still going to foul you again if you're at like 6 points or something like that. So if it is a close game, I do think that there's some ability for that. And from a trying, like an effort and minutes perspective, I think we're going to see pretty significant minutes out of the Knicks. I think that we're going to see pretty significant minutes out of mainly the starters. And the biggest thing for me here too was that when I'm thinking about this, like this is one of the bigger moments for New York basketball recently, right? And it's also been it's a pretty big moment for Tibbs. If he can bring home some hardware, I think that would be a big deal for him. So I think this game is going to be one where the Knicks are pretty locked in, they're focused, and they're going to take care of business against the Atlanta Hawks. If you're looking at the Hawks side and you said, Joe, like I got to get something on the Hawks end, I got to build SGP, I got to do this, I got to do that. I do like, before I get there, I like Brunson over 2.5 threes as well. It's at like -110-ish, depending on the book. I think that that's a little too low, honestly. He said that it's 7 of his last 10. And against Atlanta, over the past two, like this year and last year, 4, 6, and 8 in his last 3 games against them. So he's definitely stretching the floor. He's averaging 2.7 over the course of the season anyway. So I do think that that's a pretty good angle. I prefer it kind of in a parlay, I think. I don't know if I need it straight, but I do like Brunson in this game. I think he should have a good game as well. I mean, really, it's good for all the Knicks anyway. But I wanted to touch on Trae Young. His points line I'm seeing is at 20.5. But against New York, he scored 23 in the one game earlier this season, and he also had 10 assists. So I think that his assist line is at 11.5. It's a number he's been obviously hitting throughout the course of the season. He's averaging 12.2. But the thing about this number, it's almost a little deceiving in terms of what he's averaging, because he's now had 2 games at 22 and 21, or 22 and 20, and he's got another game at 19 assists. And while we see those spikes sometimes, they do tend to pull up averages pretty significantly. Sometimes we see them on the down end, but a lot of times the highs are like, there's usually a little bit more of a consistent floor where we're not seeing these like huge valleys, or so to speak. And with Trae Young, we do see some of these really, really big spikes in terms of his assists. So I would look for something with Trae Young. I do think that of anybody, he probably has the best matchup, just because of the fact that you can put Brunson and Cat and pick and roll, and then maybe you can exploit a little bit of the drop coverage that the Knicks are probably going to throw at you. So I would be looking at that. I think that might be the angle for him. Although, really, with the points, right? He's missed this line a lot. Like this 21.5, he's only hit this in 2 of his last 10 games. If you still had 20 in 4 of his last 10, but the scoring is always a little bit variable for him. But if I was looking at a Trae Young prop and I said like, oh, I need to have something, I would maybe look at, say, like double, 10 plus assists, something like that. I think it'll give you a little bit of flexibility, and the Knicks defense still isn't the best. So I think that there is a little bit of an opportunity there for a guy like Trae. And then the only other thing is maybe you could look at Dyson Daniels steals. The steals are back up again. He had like a little bit of a stretch where there was like a valley where after he was getting like 6 and 6 and 6, whatever. He had a couple games with like 2 or none, and then there's a 4, but then a couple 2s again. Right now, over the past 4 games, we're looking at 5, 4, 3, and 4. And with the way that the Knicks handle the ball and the way that, Brunson's so ball dominant, and they do have a tendency to sometimes not travel, but they do commit some charges. There is some opportunity there, I think, for Daniels to, maybe sneak in, maybe pick a couple passes off. I think this could be a good opportunity for Daniels. Like if you were looking for another prop that you're like, I have to have something from the Hawks side. So the other game that we've got is the Houston Rockets versus the Golden State Warriors. And this game pits the Rockets, who are 5th in adjusted net rating, 16-8 plus 4.9 in adjusted net. 18th, is that 18th? 16th in offense and 3rd in adjusted defense. So they're a team that's being carried by their defense. And it's similar to, honestly, to Golden State. Golden State is 9th. They are plus 3.5 in adjusted net, 13th in offense, and 5th in defense. The biggest news out of Golden State was a couple games ago against the Minnesota Timberwolves. They made this call to start Draymond Green on the bench, and Jonathan Kuminga was going to enter the starting lineup. Kuminga has stuck in the starting lineup since then, but Draymond was only on the bench for the one game, and then he was back in the starting lineup. So I'm curious to see how exactly that fleshes out, how exactly that shakes out moving forward. Even then, Draymond has tended to be in the closing lineups, right? So he was mostly on the floor. I think this game was a little bit of a blow. Like the one game against the Wolves was a little bit of a blowout, but he was in the closing lineup until the main players came out. That was the game that he started on the bench. And then again in the last game that they played, because they played a back-to-back kind of a baseball series set with the Timberwolves, he was once again in the closing lineup. But the difference was in that game he started. The biggest swing was that Kevon Looney came off the bench. So it wasn't so much that they switched Kuminga and Draymond Green. It was more that they switched actually Draymond Green. They moved Kuminga in, and then they also pulled Looney out. So that was a little bit more significant. I don't know. To me, I would be shocked if Draymond goes back on the bench. I think from a chemistry thing, I think that the minutes with Curry are good. I don't know if Kerr was like, maybe we need to stagger it a little bit. We need to try to find something that works a little bit better, because Podziemski has not really taken the leap I think that they thought he was going to. And then obviously Kuminga, they want him to be good. They like him. I think, they maybe want to keep him, but there's also so many rumors about whether he is or isn't going to get traded. It creates probably a little bit of strife in terms of what the rotation is and what the rest of the team's rotations are. So we have this matchup between the Warriors and the Rockets. Warriors opened as 1.5 point road dogs. We're seeing mostly twos in the market right now. I tend to lean towards the Rockets here, and I think that the Rockets are a better team. I think they're at home. Well, they are at home. I don't think they're at home. They are at home. Steven Adams is on the report, but Tari Eason just got cleared. He's not on the report, which I think is pretty notable for Houston in terms of their defense, in terms of the tenacity that he brings to the floor, and some of the defensive chops that he's got as well. So I think that that's like a notable add that isn't going to impact the spread, but it definitely impacts Houston's depth and their ability to counter some of the things that Golden State might do. From a player prop perspective, though, I do like Steph Curry over 34.5 PRA. So he's got 8 cashes in a row on this number against the Rockets. He's hit this in 3 of his last 5 games overall as well, averaging 23.3 points, 8 dimes, 7 boards in 32 minutes per game in cup play. So that's 4 cup games for Curry, right? Here, gets a chance to have an even greater offensive role, depending if Draymond Green's on the bench, if he's not on the bench, if their minutes are staggered a little bit. But I think they're mostly going to wind up being together, which is fine, because over the course of the season, we actually see Curry's like assist numbers go up when he's playing alongside of Draymond. I think that has to do with a lot of the offensive cohesion. But the one other thing, though, is in these types of playoff settings, what I've noticed from Curry over the past years, right? And what I've noticed from Kerr, it's kind of like a stylistic thing that the Warriors like to do. And a lot of times they try to get Curry to get the rebounds on the defensive side of the ball in order to kickstart the offense. Because from like a timing perspective, right? If you are the best player on the team, or like you're the point guard, you're the person that's supposed to have the ball, right? And in order to push the pace when a rebound's cleared, sometimes it's hard to get the ball, and it gives the opponents the opportunity to get down to the other side of the floor, get set, because maybe it takes like 2 seconds for everything to clear out where you can get a clear path to the ball. If you're set up in a way where you're not modeled, but you're coached to go and get those rebounds, everybody else will kind of fall back a little bit more. Somebody else will fall back a little bit more. You get the opportunity to get the rebound immediately. You can kind of kickstart the offense just a touch faster. So you can increase like the speed of the game, you can increase the pace of the game, and you can impact and kind of bend the defense a little bit more, because you're getting them in transition a little bit more often. And generally, these teams that are in transition, even if they are good, like it's relative to being good in the half court. It's good relative to other teams in transition. Either way, those transition opportunities tend to be better or more high quality opportunities for the offense, because the defense isn't either fully set, and a lot of times like the players are out of position, and it's a little bit harder to adjust. Curry tends to see like a little bit of an uptick, especially at the beginning of the games, in some of the rebounding numbers and some of the rebounding data. So you can bet actually over 1.5 first quarter rebounds, and I don't mind that as well. Like, it's a little bit of a sprinkle, because you're getting that at like plus 160. It's a pretty big number. But I do think that there's an opportunity here where he's going to get a little bit more run in the first quarter, where they're trying to funnel him the ball a little bit faster than they normally would in just any other regular season game. And with this rotation, the Golden State Warriors rotation has been significant. We see a lot of players playing in every single game. And here, with these cup games, like where you're in the knockout stage already, like I'm not saying that they're going to try and go run these guys like 45 minutes. It's not the NBA finals, but we might see Curry play a little bit more than like 30 minutes a game. Maybe we see him closer to like 37, 38. And even then, we're going to see a pretty significant uptick in what his output and what the raw numbers are for Curry if that's the type of minutes load that he sees here. So in any one game setting, the dude's awesome. And the Rockets, they're really good, but they have given up some big performances. Tyrese Maxey, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But then, so those are your all-stars, right? Your MVP caliber guys, not Maxey, but Shai right now. But then they've also done it to Anthony Simons and Bones Highland. So it's not like a new thing. It just is some guards are able to really get into the teeth of this Rockets defense. And I think that Steph is obviously one of the best in the league, one of the best of all time. He's going to be able to do so in this spot. From a Rockets perspective, I would look at this and say, like, Şengün has actually been fascinating because he hasn't been great in this particular matchup. He kind of has struggled. He's only scored this year. He scored 14 and 16, had 10 and 8 in rebounds, and 4 and 5 in his assists. So he actually went under his PRA line in both games. PRA line's at 37.5, and he had 28 and 29. In his last 10 games against the Warriors, he has only had he's only averaging 22.7 PRA. That's a skewed number, though, just based on the minutes. But even if we were to give him a floor of 20, he's only hit this in 1 of 7 games against the Golden State Warriors. The guy that actually tends to see a pretty good amount of burn in these matchups against the Rockets is Kevon Looney. Kevon Looney's PRA line is set at 14.5, and he's gone over that in both games this year. He's gone over in 10 of his last 12. The 2 misses are the only 2 games where he didn't play 20 minutes. Outside of that, he's going over this number every single time. The key is that it's not really so much the points. The points are a little bit more variable. It's the rebounds and the assists. So if you're able to grab an RA line, Caesars has an 8.5. That's something that I'm a little bit more interested in. I know that he kind of saved the day in one of these games with the points, and then sometimes you're able to get like a little bit of extra juice there. But the rebounds look good at 6.5, and the assists also look pretty good at 1.5. So at the rebounds and assist line at 8.5, I don't mind it. I do think though that there is probably going to be a way to back Kevon Looney. I might try to throw something together where we're watering it down even more, where we said, well, what if we did this for him to get 6 rebounds and 1 assist, or 6 rebounds and 2 assists, and chop it a little bit, narrow our outcomes, but give us a little bit more of like a higher payout. So that might be something that we try to do as well. But 6.5 rebounds as well. He's over this in 9 of 12 games against the Golden State Warriors over the past couple of seasons. So really like a lot of opportunity there for him. And on the flip side, for Houston, one of the players that has gotten continuous burn against the Warriors, Jabari Smith has looked good, and Amen Thompson looked good. Tari Eason, off the injury report, like I mentioned before, points line at 10.5, over in 4 or 5 against the Warriors. Rebounds line at 6.5, over in 4 or 5 against the Warriors. And he's only had 1 assist in every game. So he's at 1-1-1-1-1, right? You can get his PR line is 17.5. His PRA is 18.5. So sometimes those numbers will kind of tend to bleed into each other. I don't mind maybe a look at Tari Eason as well. I think this is going to be a very defensive-minded game, though, so I do have some reservations in terms of betting overs on too many players in the same game. I do think that it gets to be a little bit hairy, but with the rebounds, I don't mind that. I think that this has been a good matchup for him. Eason is an excellent defensive player. He can play in a variety of schemes, and against this Golden State Warriors team that has just so many different personnel that they can run at you, I think this is a pretty good spot for Eason as well. So I'll take Eason. I think I'm going to go with the PR for Tari Eason at 17.5. I think it's a good spot, -106 on Caesars, and we'll watch him kind of do his thing against Golden State Warriors. So even if we looked at this season, he's over this number in 12 of 22 games, and over the past, say, 10, He's hit this in 6 of 10, but he's playing at least like 15 minutes a game. And that's pretty notable because if we bump his minutes floor up to 15, he's averaging 18, 20 minutes. He starts to average 21.3 points plus rebounds. So a lot of opportunity here. And in all 5 games he's played against the Golden State Warriors, he's seen at least 20 minutes. And in the one game earlier in November, played 35 minutes for the Houston Rockets in that game against the Warriors. Tari Eason over 17.5 points plus rebounds is definitely a look for me. Turning briefly to the Thursday slate, some kind of gross games, honestly. We got the Pistons and the Celtics. We've got the Raptors and the Heat, and we have the Kings and the Pelicans. For all of these teams, it's not a back-to-back. It's a standalone game. The Celtics play again on Saturday. The Pelicans play again on Sunday, rather, and so did the Pelicans. From a scheduling perspective, though, we have the Thursday night games, regular, whatever. We have Friday night games, pretty full slate. Then we have the Saturday is cup play again, the semifinals in Vegas. And then Sunday is a regular slate. Monday, pretty packed slate. Tuesday is the NBA Cup finals. So that's what we're working with over the next couple of days looking forward, and we'll try to get as many plays out to you as we can. So for the Pistons and the Celtics, I mean, the Pistons played the Celtics pretty tough in the tournament. Cade Cunningham went absolutely bonkers. I would once again be looking at, maybe some Porzingis stuff. Peyton Pritchard in this matchup just thrives. So I'd be looking at Pritchard. I would be looking at Sam Hauser. And those are some of the particular players that I would want. I'm curious to know how fired up Boston comes out for this game, how much they're necessarily going to try, and if they would pull their starters kind of early wouldn't be super surprising to me. So I do think I would look at Pritchard in that game, definitely. And for the Raptors and the Heat, they obviously had some rumors about Jimmy Butler kind of floating around today. You never know how that impacts the team, but the Heat are 10 and a half, 11-point favorites in this spot. The biggest thing, though, is that the Raptors are saying that Barnes is going to undergo a little bit more imaging on his sprained right ankle on Tuesday. So Bruce Brown may be available, though. So before you start just diving into player props for this game, saying like, well, Barnes might not play, that seemed like a pretty bad ankle sprain that he suffered the other day. Bruce Brown might be back. Bruce Brown probably impacts some of the assists, some of the rebounds for like Grady Dick, RJ Barrett. And I would keep an eye on that and just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, looking at those props and saying like, okay, well, if Bruce Brown is back, even in probably a limited capacity, I would say maybe 20 minutes at most, what does that do to some of these player props in this game? So definitely something to consider there. And for the final game on the Thursday slate for the Kings and the Pelicans obviously don't have Brandon Ingram right now, and he's going to be out for the next, couple of weeks, it sounds like. When we look at the rest of their roster, Zion's still out. Hawkins looks like he's maybe going to be reassessed, but I think I'd be a little bit surprised if he's able to go. It's going to be a lot of DeJounte Murray. So just have to keep an eye on his props. And this is, once again, probably going to be an excellent matchup, I would imagine, for Domantas Sabonis. So I want to actually pull that up while we got everybody here. I want to see how Sabonis did against the Pelicans earlier this year, if they played. No, so they haven't played this year yet. Sabonis should eat in this matchup, just in terms of the rebounding against Misi's I think Misi's really good, but Daniel Tice might not be able to go either for the Pelicans. This is going to be an excellent spot for Domantas Sabonis. So I'll be looking at his rebounds, maybe his PRA, maybe his RA. It's really just going to depend on what the line comes out at, but I am going to be looking at Sabonis to really clean the glass in this spot. Then just with a little bit of a look ahead to Friday, the Pacers on the road against the 76ers. Joel Embiid's had a pretty good chunk of time to, kind of take some time off with the knee, kind of recover. Had a big game last time out. Halliburton's been absolute buns on the road, so don't really have a huge interest in backing the Pacers there. The Lakers and the Timberwolves, we lost this last time. AD looked like shit, but AD has dominated this matchup against Rudy Gobert. So I'm going to be looking at I'm going to definitely be looking at a points prop for Anthony Davis. I think that with all the time off, that's going to be a good spot to back him to really kind of have a big explosion against the Minnesota Timberwolves. For the Clippers versus the Nuggets, Zubac has been great this season. I think that maybe a rebound look against Jokic would be pretty solid here. And Jokic has also been good in this matchup. It's kind of one of those where these two guys are just banging on the interior and they're both able to kind of rack up some counting stats, even though it doesn't always, it's a little counterintuitive. Like you wouldn't think it would be a good matchup for both of them, but they both have been excelling in this particular matchup. So definitely something to keep an eye on, and definitely something that I'm very interested in kind of seeing. And I want to see where those player props come out as well. And for the Phoenix Suns, maybe Kevin Durant comes back. They said that he's going to be reevaluated in 1 week on December 4th. So we're kind of about there now. Hopefully they maybe get, Grayson Allen back, Ryan Dunn back, Yusuf Nurkic maybe could be back for that game. So they play the Utah Jazz. Would be very notable to wait and see what that injury report looks like, especially after having all these days off. If some of those guys aren't able to go, it does hint a little bit even more towards like, what is the severity of these injuries? Like, how big of a deal is this? So just something to keep an eye on, something to kind of pay attention to as well. Now, I wanted to talk about what we saw so far in the NBA Cup games, right? So we saw the Bucks really like barely get through against the Orlando Magic, who don't have Franz Wagner, don't have Paolo Banchero. And it was crazy because the spread was -5. Wagner gets ruled out. We bet it immediately. Line goes up to 9.5. Probably should have middled it there, but number comes down, closes at 7. I think there was a 6.5 actually in the market. A lot of steam back towards Orlando, and they showed up. They really truly showed up. The biggest thing though was Orlando shot 37%. Or oh no, I'm sorry, looking at the wrong thing here. Orlando shot a ton of not too many threes, but they started off pretty hot. And they really cooked from mid-range. They took 41% of their shots from mid-range, shot 47% from there. Could not stop Milwaukee at the rim. Milwaukee took 38% of their shots from the rim. They were 88.5%. They were 23 of 25 on shots at the rim. So really it's really hard to win if that's what you're going to do. And Milwaukee was dominant in the half court to a degree, right? They were able to score very effectively. They were able to get a ton of putbacks, but Orlando was able to kind of keep themselves involved because they were rebounding the basketball so well. They had an offensive rebounding percentage per cleaning glass here, 45.9%. This is in the 99th percentile. So they really were able to capitalize on that and capitalize on those second chance opportunities. That's something that New York, for example, has not been great at doing this season. That was something they used to be really good at. Haven't really had to this year. It hasn't been the same. So have to see if that's something that New York can kind of exploit. Look, I'm saying this, I think that New York should get through. If they don't, Atlanta has exploited this. Atlanta has made it very difficult for Milwaukee because of the way that they attack their defensive coverage. Milwaukee's almost always in a drop, and it's been extremely successful for Trae Young and this offense to attack that. So Atlanta would be 100% live against Milwaukee, and they just beat them the other day. I'm not saying Atlanta's one of those teams that could go out there and beat anybody on any given day, but to bet on them to win multiple games consecutively, I don't know about that. That's kind of where I might draw the line. So fascinating game from Milwaukee, and fascinating game in the fact that Orlando really had to lean so heavily on Jalen Suggs, who pretty much has never really needed to have this much usage for this Orlando Magic team. And the dude just showed up. 32 points for Jalen Suggs, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, just tremendous performance. But from the rebounding perspective, Batazze, 14 boards, Wendell Carter Jr., 11 boards, Jalen Suggs, 9 boards. They were hustling, absolutely hustling. So something to monitor moving forward as we see when exactly Paolo gets back, because that's a little bit sooner, but they are going to be without Franz Wagner for the foreseeable future as well. Cole Anthony, ton of volume. Dude just was horrible. 2 for 12, 0 for 3 from 3. Really just a nothing burger stat wise. So have to see if he really gets any more run, or if this at this point they're just going to say, hey, we'd rather give the minutes to Anthony Black and see exactly what he can do with a little bit of a greater opportunity. So curious to see that. And then Chris Middleton's shot has not been right. He scored 0 points, only took 2 shots. That I think is the more notable thing. Only took 2 shots. Have to see what happens in the next game. But I'm really curious to see where exactly the line comes out. But 4 boards, 8 assists might be a good spot for a little Chris Middleton RA. Might also be a decent spot to say, like, hey, let's see where this points line is, because it's a great buy low opportunity on Chris Middleton. I know he's struggled a little bit, but definitely something that we got to keep an eye out for. As for the Mavericks and the Thunder, we saw Luka have probably one of the worst games that he's had, like, flat out all season and probably in a while. 16 points, 11 boards, 5 assists, 6 turnovers. Had 4 steals, so decent in terms of defense there, but 5 for 15 from the field, 2 for 8 from 3. Just bad news. He was in the torture chamber the entire game. Really, really tough. And then even Kyrie Irving, 17 points, but he didn't really get going until the second half. And what we saw was a masterclass by Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. 39 points, 8 boards, 5 assists. Just a tremendous performance by him. And it was a really strong game for Oklahoma City. They dominated from front to back, 118 to 104. There was a point where Dallas really kind of got it close, but it never was really that close. It got fun, but it never really felt too close. It almost felt like the run was inevitable. I will say we're kind of mirrored the minutes that Luka played. Looking forward in the tournament, I don't know if there's anybody that they would necessarily use Dort to shadow because of just what the personnel is, right? But because of that, and because of how good his defense is, like Turvey brought this up, is basically like the minutes are going to be there. Like he's going to play a lot more minutes because he's so good at, just saying like, hey, go cover this guy. I do think, though, that he presents Luka with a particular issue. And the particular issue is that because Luka's not fast, Dort can deal with him from like a strength perspective. He doesn't have to be super nimble. He has to be like obviously a little bit, but it's a little bit more of like a strength-based matchup, right? Like, let me get in your shirt. He can't do the same thing to faster opponents in the same way that he would do it to Luka. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that Luka's a big guy, so you can be a little bit more physical, and it's not going to be as obvious sometimes. So I think that Dort's point of attack defense is excellent. I think that it's almost like perfectly optimized to go against a guy like Luka Doncic. But if he had to cover a guy like Kyrie for a whole game, I don't know if it would 100% be the same way. I don't know if it would like 100% be the same if you had to cover like a Curry, or Jalen Green's not a good example because he just does it to himself. Or like a Brunson. Cat's too tall. So there are some other wrinkles there. But right now, Oklahoma City 100% should be the favorite to come out of the West. And realistically, they should probably be the favorite overall. They're the best team in the West. They're better than the Knicks in terms of adjusted net rating. They're better than the Bucks in terms of adjusted net rating and all the advanced metrics. So really definitely something I want to see. I will note, though, that moving forward, I'm going to be wanting to target guys that take a high percentage of their shots from the corner against Oklahoma City. Klay Thompson, somebody that did that. We targeted him in this last game, and we grabbed over 2.5 threes. He was 5 for 10 from 3. So a lot of opportunity there. I think we'll kind of keep an eye on what the schedule obviously looks like, but they'll be playing the Warriors or the Rockets. So there's definitely gonna be an angle for us on one of those teams. Maybe it's Buddy Hield, maybe it's like a Pajemski or a Kuminga. Maybe it's one of those angles for if it's Golden State. And if it's the Rockets, we'll have to see. Maybe a little Fred VanVleet, although I would imagine that he takes most of his from above the breaks. We'll dive into it. We'll get some plays out there and make sure to get you the best of all these lines. But the best way to get all these lines is to join the huddle. You can join. We got a link down here. I'll give you a day for free or 50% off, whatever the coupon is, right? That I feel like putting in there. The key is you're getting these lines overnight. Sometimes like I'm not always putting the analysis in there right then and there. You'll get it in the morning, but it does give me the ability to get lines out to you faster, and I don't have to worry about things getting nuked instantly. There is a little bit more of a window, which is critical because, if you're betting on some of these props, you want to have an opportunity to bet them and also live your life. Like I don't expect you to need to have my notifications on 24/7 or you're not going to get the line. Sometimes if it's a really niche prop, those are a little bit harder as always. But again, if you're in the huddle, you're going to have the best opportunity to be able to get those. So really great opportunity, really transparent. We are cooking right now on I'm on a 23-1 straights run. So it's been really profitable over the past couple days over here, which is absolutely cooking on fire. So look, you can pay back your monthly membership relatively quickly between my plays, that guy bets, Matty Chucks, Lord Penguin. Great opportunity there for you guys to get a little bit more value and help support me and help support some of the work and the plays and the analysis that I'm able to give to you guys. Lets me keep doing that, right? So that's number one on the list here. But from a pods and recs perspective, we are going to get into this right now. I'm going to recommend, I got these like automatic timers for my Christmas lights. Awesome. Then I found out that they have automatic timers that also have a remote control. Those are great because sometimes like you're just like, well, these just need to go off right now. Like I'm done. Like I want these off or I want them on, whatever. Gives you a little bit more flexibility. Pretty nice to have. I'm going to recommend those like the remote controlled light fixtures or so to speak. Those are especially for Christmas, fucking fantastic. And I'm also going to recommend, I had another one here. I might have just lost it, but I am going to, this is completely, I completely blanked on this. I had it and it's gone, but I will make another recommendation. And that recommendation is Pasta Vazul. It's clearly soup season right now. We are getting to like the height of soup season, probably a little bit after Christmas, probably about like mid-January is like the height of soup season. But Pasta Vazul, it's great. It's a nice hearty soup. You can do it however you want. Throw a little pepperoni in there, throw a little beef in there if you want to get a little extra protein in there. And you could even do it if you want to be a little healthier, do it with some ground turkey and then do a little bit of pepperoni in there to add a little bit of extra flavor. So love a little bit of Pasta Fazool. Think it's just one of those soups that is hearty and it gives you that like pasta kind of feel without there necessarily being the same amount of pasta as there normally would be if you had like a bowl of spaghetti. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. It is bulking season, so a nice hearty Pasta Vazul, not too shabby to just throw in and heat up on a little bit of a cold, almost winter. We're almost in winter now. A little bit of a colder day as we head into the holiday season. So don't forget that, and don't forget to buy your presents. Get them earlier. It's so much easier. Just take care of that. Just get it done now. Put an order in, call it a day. So once again, this episode is brought to you by our good friends at Rhythm, and get a week for free or get 25% off your first month. Use the codes right here in the link, right here in the bio, and be sure to rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, tell everybody to listen to the Cash That podcast. It helps you, helps me, and we will continue to cash that.